Unless you've been living under a rock recently, you've probably seen some videos talking about how Blizzard can go about fixing Mythic Plus or how Mythic Plus is broken and can it be saved. I know there have been a lot of creators that I have been seeing making these videos, and rightfully so. I think Mythic Plus is kind of in a shattered state right now, and there's a lot that they can do to repair it. And I have not watched all of those videos, but they are everywhere right now, so I highly suggest that you look into them if you're interested. But in today's video, I wanted to offer a healer's perspective or a unique perspective and kind of take the healer point of view of this issue. What is wrong with healing? Why has healing felt broken lately in the past few tiers, and especially in Mythic Plus, but kind of also in Raid? And I want to start off with something that I haven't heard anyone else really talking about, but as someone who pugs all of their keys and does heal all the time, I've noticed this as the biggest glaring issue of what has made pugging healing much less fun, and that is fail to heal mechanics. And there are a lot of these. Now, I'm not talking about mechanics that are failed when the healer can't heal enough. That's not what I mean by fail to heal. I mean, they were failed mechanics and then they become heal mechanics or healer mechanics. So I'm going to be using some examples from Stone Vault here just to kind of keep us all in the same space, all in the same dungeon. But I want to talk about the crystals, talking about Skarmorak here, where when it spawns the crystals and you have to burn one down and it pops and does damage and it just does more and more damage as you pop them. This is a whole party-wide mechanic. The whole party has to play this mechanic smartly, and if not, it will fail. You will fail the mechanic. And how you do it is you pop them one at a time and not super quickly in succession, or they will just burst and do big damage. But the way that this mechanic is failed is obviously if your DPS, mainly because they're going to be the ones deciding which one dies. If they all pick different ones and they all pop at the same time and just the damage gets insane and overwhelms you. But in lower keys, especially, if you pop two at the same time or even like three at the same time, they don't kill you. They just do a ton of damage. And, that's great, right? We don't die. Yes, but also no, this is kind of an issue because if it's not killing you, it's putting you all at, in mortal range, or like death basically is knocking on the door. Everyone needs to be topped up super fast, and all of a sudden this failed mechanic just becomes so much harder on only the healer. Only the healer has to bear this burden of everyone else failing the mechanic. And as someone who does mythic rating and pushes cutting edge every tier since I've started rating, really, I've noticed all throughout the years that one thing they do in rating, but don't necessarily do in Mythic Plus, is they will do one-shot mechanics. If you fail this mechanic, it just kills you. There's no surviving it. Maybe like a Blood Death Knight with Purgatory or some cheat death or something can survive it, but the mechanic is designed to actually kill you dead. Like it does like 1,000% more damage if failed, and there's no way to survive it. And in Mythic Plus, they don't really do that. As far as I know, they just avoid that at most costs. I'm sure they've done it in the past, and I'm sure I could think of examples if I thought long enough, but most of these mechanics, if failed, just lead to more damage. So I know this might be a little controversial, but I think in Mythic Plus, they shouldn't be afraid to just flat out kill you. That way it's more obvious what the issue was, and I think it would make it easier for newer players to learn these mechanics if they don't like watch a guide already. But also, if someone fails a mechanic, it then cannot be pinned on the healer, because like I said, I pug keys, and I have been in groups this season where multiple shards are killed at the same time. Everyone pops and they look at me and say, healer, what happened? Like, why couldn't you heal that? And these things just get very frustrating and very tiring as a healer. Now, moving on to Brock and Dorlita, or whatever they're called, another mechanic on this boss is the multi-metal cast. And you know that Dorlita jumps away, and if she gets that cast off at the most inopportune time, like during the cube or the big explosion or the vents, or any of the other damage mechanics, if that cast goes off, it becomes unhealable in hierarchy. But like in plus 11s, plus 10s, and below, anything below, it just becomes a ridiculous amount of damage that still, yes, can be survived. Like if I pop Revival plus Chi plus Shayloons, you know, like if you dump every healing cooldown and get lucky and you have DPS that can pop defensives, you can survive that overlap. But this is just another example of a mechanic that, if failed, becomes a healer mechanic. And I do recognize that this isn't always just this isn't a DPS or a tank mechanic. It's that in specific is a ranged mechanic. You know, if someone has a ranged kick, they can cover it, but a lot of the healer specs don't have a ranged kick. So, you know, it kind of falls in that bucket. Like a Resto Shaman could handle it and it could be the healer's mechanic, but you guys know what I mean. But staying in Stone Vault, I also want to talk about other mechanics that I'm sure you can think of 1,000 of them that, if failed, become healer mechanics. And one of the big ones is Piercing Wail. This is it's just an umbrella type of cast where I'm sure you can think of 1,000 of these, where if the cast goes off, damage happens. And these happen all over the dungeon pool, all over across the seasons in the past. Just a cast goes off, damage happens. And once again, this is just a great example of fail to do the mechanic, fail to kick this cast, healer has to deal with it. And there's nothing else that another party member can do to deal with it after the damage goes off, other than do some self heals or something. But there are some other types of casts that I think are getting just tiresome to deal with as a healer. And those, like, a great example is the censoring gear casts. If this cast goes off, whoever it's targeting will just be silenced for a few seconds, and this can be dispelled, which I think is kind of a mistake. Maybe it should just be able to be self-dispelled, kind of like how they coded the affix Devour, which I will talk about in this video. But I don't think it should be on the healer to dispel, X, Y, and Z player because that cast goes off. And yes, if the cast goes off and it hits the healer, that is a problem too. Like, the healer would have to deal with that. But this mechanic, always, I see this cast, people let this one slip through all the time, just expecting, I guess, to be dispelled, and that's just very frustrating. But there are also a lot of casts that do other things like that, like applied dots too. If a cast goes off, it applies a dot, like the poisons in I was about to say Ataldazar, but the poisons in Arakara. If those casts go off, then it's just a giant dot that the healer has to heal through. Or, you know what? Guess what? They can also dispel it. It's just adding. It's basically, if a DPS wants to sit down and play a video game and have a good time and ignore some of the mechanics, they can do that. But a healer can't, because if we try to sit down and go through like a laxed +8, then every mechanic is going to be ignored, but we're going to bear all of the burden of all of those ignored mechanics by the other players. And yes, once again, I'm not saying that we can't just kick it ourselves or stop it ourselves, but we also only have one kick, and if everyone's doing their part, then the healer doesn't have to worry about this. But you guys know that doesn't always happen. But there are so many different mechanics like that where, when failed, just flat out become a healer mechanic, or at least people think that it can be a healer mechanic. And I think that this design is just, one, it's getting very tired. I think we see a lot of that, like, oh, this cast goes off, there's some damage. But two, I think, it's just such a big category. How does it do the damage? Does it put a dot? Does it do a big burst? Does it, do some ticking damage? There's just so many types of casts that do that. But what I would like to see to fix this issue is, one, for the not one-shotting fails, I would like to see those actually one-shot you. If you pop 2 shards at once on bosses like Skarmorak, I would like to see the party actually get wiped, and not even close. I want to see it do like 10 billion damage so that everyone's just dead, no surviving that. That way we know it was an issue that we can fix by just rearranging our DPS. I would also like to see these like failed casts. Take like censoring gear, for example. I already offered like one kind of solution, is if that cast does go off, and say like your Windwalker monk, for example, gets silenced for like 5 seconds, instead of allowing it to be just a magic debuff that anyone can dispel, it should be a personal debuff that like only that player can dispel. So if you let that cast go off and hit you, then you have to use like diffuse magic, or maybe you have to heal a certain amount, kind of like the healers have to do with the Devour affix or something like that. Or even I would like to see casts that, instead of just doing big damage, they punish players based on their spec. So there are already things like that for healers. Obviously, the ones that get off and do big damage, that punish punishes the healer. The ones that the casts that get off and make your tank take more damage, those exist too, and those are very frustrating to deal with. But it's a good way to kind of punish the tank. But there's not really too many that punish the DPS. I mean, we have seen some casts in the past that when they get off, like people just do less damage. Like this enemy takes 20% less damage or something like that. But I think what could be cool is instead of censoring gear acting how it does right now, which this isn't a super frustrating cast, it's just a good example. If instead of acting the way it does right now, if it like put one of your spells randomly on cooldown for 10 seconds, imagine you're playing the game, you just look at a cast that's going your way and you're like, I'm not going to kick that, it doesn't do any damage. And then all of a sudden, like your main cooldown just goes on cooldown for 10 seconds when you were just about to use it. Like something like that, or like one of your rotational spells, like your Tiger Palm just goes on cooldown for 10 seconds because that cast hits you or something. That could be cool. But that would also not lead back to the healer. The healer wouldn't even have to see that failed mechanic happen. It's just a mechanic that punishes a DPS player, which right now I just don't think that there are many other than just killing them or doing damage to them. Okay, I talked about that point a lot, but I think there are just so many examples of those types of mechanics that when failed, just punish the healer. But let's go ahead and move on. Let's talk about the kick change that happened this season. If you don't know, they made a lot of caster mobs. If you don't specifically interrupt or kick their cast, they'll just cast it again. And there are a lot in this dungeon pool, and it's very frustrating because I know the intent behind this is they wanted to kind of slow down how good AoE CC is. Like imagine you go into a dungeon, a caster starts, like a big group of casters start their cast, you just leg sweep, stun them all, and then you don't have to worry about it. And then if they start casting again, you just cap totem them. You don't have to worry about it. And then, you just stack your AoE CCs. And that's kind of what we've seen in the past, but they want to move away from that, kind of not allow you to just chain AoE crowd control mobs. But I think this really hurts pugging in general because we honestly we couldn't coordinate that to begin with. Let's be real. How many times have you leg swept as your shaman has cap totemed? But this not only punishes pugging, but it punishes casters too. Because if you as the, like, say Mistweaver monk and your Ret Pally and your Blood DK all interrupt the same cast at the same time, all three of your interrupts go on cooldown. And that is just so bad because say you're fighting the pack in Necrotic Wake where you're fighting the Necromancer and you see all those Frostbolt volley mages going off. If you all interrupt the same mage and then all of your kicks are on cooldown, then you kind of have to panic and use like whatever other CC you have to kind of slow down the other mage until your kick comes off cooldown. But the problem is like most of your kicks come off at the same time, so you just kick the same one again, or maybe all of you opt to go to this other one. It's chaos, right? And one very easy fix to kind of stay on the path that they're on right now, where you're trying not to allow just AoE crowd control to just run dungeons. If they wanted to stay on that path, what they could do is do what they've done to dispels. Because a while back, if two healers dispelled the same target at the same time, obviously whoever clicked their button first would actually get rid of the debuff, but the other healer's dispel would also go on cooldown. But nowadays, if I go to dispel Johnny and Tony goes to dispel Johnny, but I hit him first, Tony's dispel cooldown is still there. You can still dispel the next person. So like in raid fights, like right now we're progging Mythic Council. If two people accidentally dispel the tank or something, then you'll still have your dispel if you hit it second. If they did that with kicks, that would just like change the world. And then I think that would also make newer beginner players also more incentivized to press your kick because there's no longer a punishment behind kicking something that doesn't need to be kicked. If all 5 allies kick the same cast at the same time, all 5 kicks go on cooldown. But in a world where that didn't happen, if you're in a group with a bunch of new players and you see a cast going off, everyone just goes to kick it, and then one person's cooldown or kick goes on cooldown, the rest of the groups doesn't. That would just incentivize newer players to press their kick. There would be no punishment behind actually pressing your kick. But right now it just feels so bad when 2 people go to kick the same cast. So although I do see why they made this change, and I do see it how it was semi-necessary, I do think that that was only step one in the path to making this change feel good and play well and meaningful. But moving on to the next thing, I wanted to talk about something that I've seen across other videos. I think a long time ago, I watched a video by Jack. I'm sure you guys know Jack. He was talking about how the time to top has changed a lot. Now, I'm going off of memory here, so if I'm misremembering how he says it, I am so sorry. But how the game has been in the past is, if say everyone in the raid or everyone in the party goes down to 20% health, then I cast my flash heal on someone. Nowadays, that flash heal is expected to do like 30% of someone's health. It's supposed to top them up very quickly, my casts are, whereas back in the day, that flash heal could have done like, say, 5% of that ally's health. Yes, you're moving health bars as a healer a lot slower. It'll take a lot more casts to top people up, but it really does slow down the game to a more enjoyable pace. And yes, I'm using very exaggerated numbers here. It doesn't have to be quite that slow, but cutting the time to top in half would reduce the blood pressure of every healer player around the world. Trust me, I can attest to this because my blood pressure has gone sky high since swapping to healer. It is ridiculous, or at least since like Dragonflight season 1. Yeah, and my blood pressure, I feel it just rising every time I do a key. Those boss fights where you have to just constantly be on it, I am just like, I forget to breathe. I can't breathe because if I breathe, I don't have a global to heal, So it's I think that is a very big issue, the time to top, and how healers are just expected to be able to move a health bar from like 40% to 100% with like one or two globals. Yes, I think cooldowns like revival and the big cooldowns should be able to kind of do that, or heal big. And I think cooldowns should still be as relatively powerful as they are. I just think that health bars should move slower. I don't think that there shouldn't be any mechanics that are lethal. Obviously, I want people to be at risk of dying to damage. I want my healing to be impactful, but I think you can still do that in a world where health bars move slower, where they move down and up slower. Our time to top, my casts don't do as much of a percentage of their health bar, but top people up slower. I think that could also help raid fights more. There would be a lot less overhealing, and it would still be meaningful. We'd still have to get the whole party or whole raid topped before the next mechanic. But yeah, just right now it's just so volatile and it's very stressful on healers, and that is like one of the biggest reasons, the stress behind healing, of why I hear a lot of people just swapped off healing this season or last season, or just swapped and have never looked back, because it's just, you can play other roles and not be as stressed. Not saying that they aren't stressful, I'm just saying you don't have to be as stressed when you play them. That's that topic. I just wanted to mention that really quick. I think that is also something important that they could look at. But I wanted to talk about mechanics designs, like actually building a dungeon, building mechanics behind a dungeon, and how they could do them a bit better. And I want to talk about Mists of Tyrna Scythe as just a general example. I never knew how much I did not like Mist of Tyrna Scythe until this season. I was so excited when they announced that it was coming back, but I forgot just how much of the burden of this dungeon is just put on the healer. And don't get me wrong, it's not hard. And yes, you can use weak auras to make your life so much easier to solve the puzzle. But I think despite having all of these tools that can make it easier, this kind of mechanic just highlights, from a healer's point of view, how bad, or like, I'm not gonna say lazy, because the devs are definitely not lazy, but the design is just not quite there. So how it works is you just stand by a totem. You guys know the Mist Maze. You just stand by a totem to highlight what a puzzle piece looks like, and you find the one that doesn't look like the rest. And the problem with this is that, yes, the packs that you're fighting during the puzzle are threatening. They're life-threatening. The healer has to heal, but not every one of them is. The problem with this role, I don't think, is how the mobs are designed. I don't think if they would have just scaled up how much damage these packs are doing, then the healer has to be engaged in the pack and not running around solving a puzzle. I don't think that's the way to kind of fix mechanics like this. instead of scaling up the mobs that you're fighting for the mist puzzle in particular, if they would have just changed the way the totems work. Imagine one of the four totems the healer has to stand on. Maybe it's lit up green, and then the other of the four totems the tank has to stand up. It's lit up blue, and then the other two a DPS player has to stand next to so that it'll reveal the puzzle. If they would have just done that one, I guess like filtering thing on each of the totems, just engage a role that's not the healer into doing the puzzle or solving the puzzle, or at least participating, it would reduce a lot of the burden on the healer in that dungeon. And yeah, you might be thinking all you do is just run around and solve a puzzle, but it's that stacked on top of the mental strain of the pack, the healing that needs to be done, the dispels that come out, the dots that come out. Like, there is a lot more, and especially this season, there's been another affix that I will once again talk about that is just compounded on top of that. But there are a lot of mechanics that, if they don't specifically engage the DPS or tank roles, then they just fall upon the healer to do. So if they find ways to just literally force a DPS player to engage with a mechanic like a boss mechanic, then those roles will have to help the healer do them, and they won't just be a chore for the healer. And speaking of chores for the healer, I think it's time that we start talking about affixes, and this is going to close out the video because I don't know. There's been some good affixes in the past, ones that I've enjoyed healing and messing with, but then there have been some affixes that I think a lot of people agree are just not good design, or not that they're not good design. Once again, the devs cook and they're very good, but they're not fun designs. They're not fun for at least the healer. Now, most affixes, or not most, but a lot of affixes are designed in a way kind of like the Mist's Maze, where they kind of just fall back to the healer. And the big example of this is dispels. Think back on Afflicted. How many times did you have to dispel both Afflicted mobs, and then your tank died to a debuff because you couldn't dispel the tank, and no one else was helping you heal or dispel the affix? Like, these mechanics or these affixes are just so obnoxious to deal with only for the healer. And yes, other roles can help with this. Like, if you have a Brewmaster Monk, he can dispel an Afflicted, but in unorganized groups or with newer players, some people just don't know how that works. And yes, you could argue they should, or they need to learn that, but you guys know, even people who know how to do an affix, they sometimes just won't, and it then just falls back on the healer, and it's very, very obnoxious. Now, one affix that I do want to talk about that kind of just displays the disparity between how much gets dumped on healers and then how much like DPS don't have to worry about things, and that is explosives. I know they've gotten rid of explosives, trust me, but I want to talk about the storyline of explosives a bit. Now, explosives were an old affix where orbs would spawn around and you'd have to walk up to them and like melee them, or use like a single target ability on them to kind of get rid of them. So how that worked is, when you were fighting a mob, say that I'm on my Mistweaver, it would be so much more efficient if I, the Mistweaver, ran around and just Tiger Palmed all of them than if my warrior pulled off of the enemies that we're actually fighting, because both of our hits would do the same damage to the explosive, whereas his hit would do more damage to the actual mobs that we're fighting. So that affix did kind of just fall on the healer in a lot of groups, and it was just very annoying because it just was more efficient for both of us to hit that explosive. So they wanted to kind of fix that. They wanted to make one giant explosive that if you didn't kill it in time, it just did something. It did something very bad. I think it just exploded and killed people. I could be wrong there. I don't remember quite what it did when it exploded, but it was just one orb instead of a bunch of little ones, and you had to actually do damage. It had a health bar. It wasn't just at 1 HP that you needed to look at, click, and be done with. It had a health bar. You had to burst it down. And I think you had to pop like cooldowns, like it had a lot of health, or it just killed you. Now, this is better on the healer because all of a sudden, the fact that I just do less damage than like my warrior counterpart means that he is incentivized to now hit the affix. But there were just so many issues with his affix, and the fact that the fact that DPS had to waste their cooldowns on this affix to burst it down just felt very punishing and very annoying for DPS players. But then they made Devour. They made Devour, guys, which is which is the one where everyone gets kind of like a mini heal absorb. You know, you have to heal their whole health bar or dispel this debuff off of them, and which is kind of like that version. It's kind of like the big explosive version for healers. Because now we either rely on our group to dispel the debuff, which in a lot of groups they do. You know, your people swap their talents so that they can also help dispel themselves. But if you don't get that, and I'm sure you guys have experienced that this season during that week, if they don't help dispel their Devour Affix, now all of a sudden you as the healer has to dispel yourself and then wait 8 seconds, dispel the tank, and then pop a cooldown in order to do the healing required in the time before that debuff runs out on your 3 DPS. And it's so obnoxious. And the fact that they looked at the outcry of please don't implement this new explosive because I have to use my cooldowns to burst it down. Please don't add this into the game. And I'm sure there was other things wrong with it. But then they were like, oh, but healers, if healers have to use a cooldown for an affix, that's fine. The fact that that slipped through just shows that they're like, they don't want DP, like they don't want other roles to have to struggle like healers have to struggle. And I know, trust me, I'm not trying to like start anything with DPS players. I know that you guys go through just as much and have your own, you know, struggles in dungeons, but this is just a healer's point of view. It's just like, it's crazy to me that that old explosive mechanic got scrapped and then they just kind of like gave healers like one that where we have to just pop a cooldown. To me, that just does not make sense. But I don't know. I mean, I wanted to talk about affixes and how the what's it called, the bite kiss, the curse ones, the ones that if you do it it helps you, if you don't it hurts you. A lot of times it feels like a chore to do as a healer because one, a lot of these just get dumped on the healer to do, and if you don't do them, you're just punished. But if they got rid of the kiss curse aspect and just made it like, hey, here's this incentive. If you do it, great, you'll get buffs. You know, it'll help you out. Your healer will get some mana back. But if you don't do this incentive, you're not punished. Like here's an ad in this like a free ad to kill and Mystic Tear and a Scythe right before the boss. You can kill it, kind of like Spiteful or the old like Shadowlands ones. But if you don't, you're not punished for doing it. I think these kind of affixes are better than the kiss curse because, like I said, it's just not fun getting punished, especially if all of the work of doing that chore is just dumped on you as the healer. Guys, that's just my take on it. I think there's just a lot of flaws, I really do, but it's still so much fun. Don't get me wrong, I'm still having a blast. I'm still here playing it. I'm trying to make a living off of doing it, so I still love this game and I want to see it go in the right direction. But as a healer, I hear a lot of y'all's feedback about what's wrong with healing, and it's just a lot of this, but I kind of just wanted to categorize it and just display my thoughts mixed with what I've seen from you guys in just one video. But once again, I have to say this, I don't want to upset any like DPS players or tank players because I know, like I said, you guys have all of your own stuff that's going on that is just as hard, but I'm just talking from specifically these affixes and these mechanics standpoint. A lot of them, and it's not your fault, they do just get dumped on the healer. So please put the pitchforks down if you're a DPS player and you're upset because you do more damage than me. So please don't come at me. But guys, thank you so much for watching this video. If you agree with what I say and what I think is kind of hurting healing as a role in Mythic Plus or even in rating, then let me know that down in the comments below. But also if you disagreed, it's totally fine to disagree with this because this is just my opinion on what's wrong from my experience. And you guys have your own experiences and your own opinions, and I am very much wanting to engage with those. So definitely leave your takes down below in the comments below and let's have a discussion. What can they do to fix Mythic Plus healing? How can we bring back the player base that's just slowly dying off and as far as healers go? But guys, thank you so much for watching this video. Like it on your way out. Make sure you're subbed. Please, it helps me out a ton. It's a click of a button. It's free to do. And also, if you want to watch me play some healers, I do stream Monday, Wednesday, Friday on twitch.tv. Also on YouTube, here on YouTube, both /LBNinja7. So definitely follow me on Twitch, subscribe on YouTube so that you see me go live. And I'm doing an all healers to KSH challenge, all 7 specs, 0 to hero. A lot of fun. But guys, thank you so much for the support. And I'll see you guys in the next video. Until then, take care.